On this episode of Newscast, we're joined by our colleague from Belfast, Emma Vardy. Hello, welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Shall we have a 2-hour-long chat about the Northern Ireland Protocol?
Oh,
I
yes,
would
please.
love nothing more.
Sorry, Joe. No, I'm just kidding. There was some news this week, though, and I want to ask you, is there going to be a phone charger border down the Irish Sea?
Oh.
It looks like there is. Now, if you're like me and
Although
you
it'd be
spend...
that way, wouldn't it?
I spend so much of my
Yes.
life running around trying to get more juice into my phone and then draining it again, scrolling through Twitter or whatever. But remember these cables you get where you get one plug in the middle and then all the different phone charger cables for different makes of phones? Well, the EU's basically agreed, look, we're going to end all that. What we're going to do by autumn 2024 is agree that all portable devices, so phones, and I guess that includes things like iPads as well, must use the same charger. Now, you might think, oh, that's pretty convenient, right?
do.
It means we could borrow anyone's charger and charge things up. But the UK said, well, actually, we're not thinking of following those plans because we could do our own thing now. But for Northern Ireland, of course, is still in the EU single market rules when it comes to goods. So that would mean Northern Ireland would have to follow the EU direction of things. And if the UK isn't going to, you've got this phone charger border down the Irish Sea. So, yeah, if I order my next iPhone in Northern Ireland, well, it's going to have the standard generic phone charger on that all makes of phones will come over here. And you guys it'll be different.
So I can't throw my charger away?
Unless the manufacturers just decide to apply the rules of the biggest market to everyone. And actually, iPhones, for example, just become one charger for everyone, irrespective of what your domestic regulatory regime is.
Yeah, Apple could decide to do this. But they pushed back on this before, saying it stifles innovation. If they want to make the plug sockets like smaller, they want to be able to do that so they can make other bits of the screen bigger, whatever. So Apple don't particularly like this themselves.
There is plenty of other stuff to discuss on this episode of Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.
Hello, it's Adam in the studio.
Hello, it's Joe in the studio.
And it's Emma Vardy here, normally in Northern Ireland. But here I am, Westminster
Welcome.
today.
Nice
Welcome.
to see you.
And we
Thank
laid
you.
on a lovely
While.
rain shower just as you stepped out of the underground station on the way to the
It's
office.
warm rain, though, compared to Northern Ireland, where it's freezing.
Actually, I have seen a few of your colleagues standing outside Stormont, the Northern Ireland Assembly, getting blown around, something
Yeah.
brought on by the weather. I mean, it looks like quite a sort of, it's not just a political danger zone.
It's a big white house up on a hill. So even if it's not windy anywhere else, you go to Stormont, it will be gale force.
It's a bit like Downing Street. Do you remember the sun never shines or rarely shines? It was always freezing cold.
The only place you have to wear your thermals in July. Now, talking of weather, Chris has been at the seaside today. But it was in Blackpool, so I'm not sure how hot it was. But politically, it was pretty hot. See what I did there? Because the
clever.
PM was doing a big speech that some people were calling a relaunch after a little bit of trouble on Monday with the confidence vote. Other people were just calling a classic day in the life of the Prime Minister, announcing some big stuff. Now, Chris Mason was there. He is, as we were recording this, on a train somewhere in Lancashire where they don't have 5G or satellite dishes on the top of trains, but he has recorded us a little message with his thoughts about what was going down in Blackpool today.
Yes, hello from the train trundling through rural Lancashire from Blackpool to Preston. And we've been in Blackpool on the Lancashire coast because the Prime Minister turned up at Blackpool and filed college in what quite a few of us journalistically had seen as a kind of relaunch for the Prime Minister after all the stuff the other night and 148 of his own MPs voting against him in that confidence vote. That kind of language was never actually used by number 10 officials, and it didn't really feel like much of a relaunch speech today. It was a kind of canter around all sorts of stuff. There was this sort of longer term idea, structural change if you like, within the economy around housing in England, and this idea of people in housing association properties, it being easier for them to buy where they live, also making it easier for people who are on benefits to use those benefits to contribute towards a mortgage as opposed to contributing towards rent. Quite a lot of criticism from some that this kind of stuff has been tried before, including by David Cameron's government, and not a lot came of it. The other stuff he talked about, which we're hearing a lot now from Conservative ministers, is this desire to cut taxes, this Conservative instinct to have a smaller state and to lower the amount of tax that we're all paying every month. Of course, the reality is that we're paying more tax now than any generation for several generations back, and that's the tussle that the Prime Minister wrestles with. These kind of economic and political gales that he's confronted by, both of which are pretty gusty. Right, I think we've got to change trains.
In Preston. Preston's your next stop.
Yeah, time to get off.
Preston, please take all your luggage, personal belongings with you. Departing Preston is service.
Thank you, Chris, and all the passengers on the train who had to listen to that, whether they wanted to or not. Now, Joe, I had a real sense of deja vu this morning because when you opened the papers or looked at them on your tablet for the previews of this speech, they were talking about the big policy will be letting tenants of social housing buy their properties in an echo of right to buy. Now, to me, that was an echo of the launch of the Tory manifesto in the 2015 general election when David Cameron promised exactly the same thing.
You can go back to 2011, you can go back to 2015, you can go back to 2017, 2019, and here we are in 2022. As somebody said on Politics Live today, Joe, it's a rehash of a rehash of a rehash of a rehash. And as another Tory MP then said to me, why don't we just get on and do it? We've been promising it all this time. It is quite a radical policy if it actually happened.
But there was other stuff as well, though. It wasn't just the rehash of the rehash of the rehash.
No, I mean, psychologically, one aspect of this, that you could use your housing benefit to pay for your mortgage, that's massive for people.
It is.
Such a feel-good factor to that policy if you're in that situation.
And you can see why it would be designed in that way, because why should the state be giving money to people to give to private landlords when they could be giving money to people to give to the banks that becomes equity in their own property?
It's all very well being able to afford a mortgage. There's so many people out there that could afford a mortgage. It's having the deposit that gets your foot on the ladder.
Well, and the bank of mum and dad, of course, is always cited as the sort of big driver inequality.
Now, Emma, I just wanted to ask about life in your patch and connecting it to our patch. Do people in Northern Ireland talk about Partygate a lot? I mean, they've had some quite heavy politics in Northern Ireland, other than Partygate.
Yeah, look, of course, you get the same kind of views in Northern Ireland that you do over here. There's some people who are outraged and say, you know, how could they be doing this, making the rules, breaking them? And then other people fed up with it at the same time. Of course, people are on the radio phone-ins, on Stephen Nolan and things like that, talking about that. But you've got to remember, in Northern Ireland, we have completely different parties over there for the most part. So there's always that level of
Political
detachment.
parties, to be
Political
clear.
parties.
Oh, I thought you meant other kind of parties.
Yeah, not the wine and cheese parties. We have those, trust me. No, but we have different political parties. So there's always that level of detachment about the drama that's going on in Westminster. Well, look, we've got our own dramas in Northern Ireland between the political parties there. And you've got to remember, you know, we had our own big sort of COVID rule-breaking by political leaders moment when there was a big IRA funeral, the Bobby Storey funeral, during one of the lockdowns, in which hundreds of people turned out. Some of the highest leaders in Sinn Féin were attending. And that was the same sort of situation where you had people making the rules and then seen to be breaking them. And that caused a real furore there. So when you look over at you know, what happened at Downing Street and what's going on in Westminster, you get a bit of eye rolling in Northern Ireland. But there's not a lot of votes in it over there. You know, the battles are different when you're in Northern Ireland.
Interesting, though, isn't it? Looking at it from a different perspective when it comes to parties and Partygate, because everyone said it's such a Westminster thing. It's something that we talk about and obsess about, and something perhaps the parties obsess about. But as you said, Emma,
when you know, in Northern Ireland, if Boris Johnson survives, there's things that people want to know that are very specific to Northern Ireland. What, you know, the Troubles legacy legislation he's brought forward. Are we going to draw a line? No more prosecutions when it comes to the old conflict. You know, is Boris Johnson going to survive? So what will happen to victims of the Troubles in Northern Ireland? What will happen when it comes to the protocol? Is he going to get through this controversial legislation to override the Northern Ireland protocol? People care more about that when it comes to Boris Johnson's future, really, than, you know, whether he was partying or not.
Right, now on Newscast, we're going to be joined by tonight's special guest, and it is Angela Rayner, leader of... Oops, maybe she would like to be leader. That's the speculation, isn't it?
Deputy leader for now.
Deputy leader of the Labour Party, someone we've wanted to have on Newscast for ages, and she's here.
Hi.
It's great to have you on Newscast. We've been trying to get you on for ages, and finally you were free on a Thursday night and we were free on a Thursday night.
Hooray!
And it's a night when Jo Coburn is here, and so of course she was watching PMQs very carefully on Wednesday because of Politics Live, weren't you, Jo?
Well, Angela, I did have a question because there was some discussion and debate about why Keir Starmer didn't go, as one Labour MP said to me, the jugular when it came to Boris Johnson's discomfort following that confidence vote on Monday. What do you think?
Well, I think he raised some really important issues. I mean, obviously, we'd been dealing with the confidence vote, and for months now, we've been saying Boris Johnson should have resigned anyway. The important thing is that Keir was talking about the devastating situation we find in the NHS, and I, of course, would be biased because one of the cases he mentioned was a constituent of mine who sadly died waiting for an ambulance for an hour. So I do think actually the chronic situation in the NHS is something that is quite significant to people across the UK, and therefore I think it was right that Keir went on that, to be honest.
Would you have done it differently? I mean, you've done PMQs quite a few times. You've got a different style, obviously, to Keir Starmer. Would you have done a different or gone down a different road in terms of your line of questioning with Keir Starmer?
I mean, obviously I am different to Keir, so we do have different styles. So the way in which I'd have gone for Boris is probably slightly different to how Keir does it. And, you know, some people don't like my style and other people don't like Keir's style. And some people like Keir's style and some people like my style. So I think that is, you know, just the difference that we bring to the table as the leader and deputy leader. But in terms of his questioning, I do think that one of the things that people say, obviously, is they are angry with Boris Johnson, they are angry at what's happened, but they're also frustrated that some of these other issues that people are facing every single day are being crowded out because of Boris Johnson won't do the right thing and resign.
So the confidence vote didn't remove him from within the Conservative Party. Have you got other tactics you could use in Parliament to try and force him out? Because he's clearly not going to do what you want him to do, which is resign.
Well, part of our tactics is to highlight that it's not just about him, you know, lying to Parliament. Obviously, we've got the parliamentary standards that we're going to be looking at whether he has intentionally lied or not, which we all think categorically he has. So we'll wait for that. But it's also about highlighting that the fact that he spent months trying to save his own neck and been distracted, that all these issues, the passport fiasco, the situation in the NHS, the cost of living crisis, is not being dealt with because the Conservative Party are too wrapped up in their own psychodrama because Boris Johnson won't do the right thing and resign. So I do think he'll go eventually, by the way, but at the moment it's costing Britain significantly while people are struggling.
What about your relationship with Keir Starmer? Did you discuss what you were going to do, what he was going to do at Prime Minister's Questions when it followed that confidence vote?
No, me and Keir don't often discuss what our tactics are when we go into PMQs. We kind of lock ourselves in our zone when we do it. So sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But, you know, Keir came and I think he did a good performance, and I actually think it was right that he went on that issue because I think it was important to people. You know, some people call it the Westminster bubble, and I understand why they think that. It is vitally important, and I keep going after Boris Johnson about his lying and breaking of the law. And that is absolutely crucial. I think most of the public now know that that's what he's done and will continue to battle that. But I do also think that the public want to see us, you know, move to issues that are important to them as well, like the NHS and the cost of living. They're fed up of the psychodrama. We all are. Boris Johnson should have left by now, but the problem we've got is those issues are not being talked about because Boris Johnson won't do the right thing. And it's not going to go away, by the way, this frustration that the public will feel and the anger. And I think they're getting more angry because they're seeing the contrast between the amount of effort the Conservatives are putting in to saving Boris Johnson is not the same amount of effort they're putting into dealing with the issues that people are facing with the cost of living and with our NHS and with the transport fiasco.
Hang on, they just spent 22 billion to help with people that, no, actually 37 billion pounds to help with the cost of living. That's a lot more than they spent saving Boris Johnson.
Well, it's not. I mean, the cost of saving Boris Johnson has been months of investigations and of you know, not dealing with these issues. I don't accept that. The only reason that the Conservatives have even bothered to try and do something about the energy crisis now is because Labour Party pushed them to it, because we said that they should have been a windfall tax and we should be looking after families that are struggling at the moment. The Conservatives weren't even bothered about that. Boris Johnson said late last year, inflation's not a problem, it's not going to be a problem, and yet look at inflation now, it's at, you know, it's at very significant levels. So I do think the evidence is that they've been asleep at the wheel, too fixated on the psychodrama in their own party to deal with the issues that matter to people. And Labour have been putting that forward. And that's what Rachel Reeves did when she talked about the windfall tax. And that's what Keir did when he talked about the NHS.
Angela, it's Emma here. I want to get a bit more nosy because I'm always fascinated by what the relationship's like between politicians when they're not in front of the cameras. I think Joe asked you quite politely there about your relationship with Keir Starmer, but can you tell me, are you mates? Do you kind of go out for a beer together? I know you've said in the past it's like being two dogs that fight together in a room and then become friends. Like, where is that relationship / friendship, love-hate relationship at?
Do you know one of the things that frustrates me the most, honestly, is that when I'm with Keir and there's not a camera in his face, he's like such a funny character, such a nice guy, that actually sometimes I think that if people saw the guy that I see every single day, that they just absolutely love him as well, because he's got massive amounts of integrity. You know that he wants to do the right thing. You know that's why he's in the job, to do it. I might not always agree on everything with him. You don't always do in the Labour Party, and we can have a debate about it, and we do, but he's very respectful of me in my role, and we do get on really well. I mean, we are different, by the way. We have different styles.
Does he need to be a bit more charismatic? You talk about this guy that's a good laugh. Does he need to bring a bit more of that into his politics then? Because personality matters in politics.
Yeah, why is he so different in private with you than he is with the entire country in public?
It's not so much, right, so it's not so much the difference, because like there's been moments of it that I've seen, like, you know, for example, there was a Prime Minister's Questions where Boris Johnson was going after Keir about what the previous leader had said and stuff around Northern Ireland, and Keir just snapped back and was like, well, while you were, like, you know, criticising on the sidelines, I was prosecuting. And he really, and I was like, go on, Keir, because that's my style, you know, and it is just a different style, but Keir is like a really decent guy, and that comes across, and I think it comes across on the cameras as well, but I do think that some of his, like, you know, conditioning as a you know, when he was in lawyer and things like that, just makes him like, sometimes he takes the emotion out of it and he puts the sort of strategic stuff in, and I think, no, put some more welly into it, because I know he doesn't care any less than I do about those issues. He just has a different style of putting it over. So that's what I mean for me, and you would hear that from me, because I'll go in with two boots, you know what I mean? Whereas Keir is a bit more sort of like, I'll go in with the strategic case and the detail, and he cross-examines in a very forensic way, which I think some people prefer that style, by the way, and other people think I'm too brash and that I should tone myself down. So I do think it's different styles, but the guy I know with Keir is, I know that he's the sort of guy that I want to look after my schools, hospitals and my public services, and not Boris Johnson, who breaks the law and lies to people.
Now, Emma mentioned the idea of you and Keir Starmer having a beer, and we know that you and Keir Starmer have had a beer at least once. It was in Durham last year when there were some COVID restrictions in place, and you had a curry as well. I mean, I've always wanted to ask what you had from the curry shop, but I don't know if you'll be allowed to answer that for legal reasons. I hear you've both had a questionnaire from Durham Police who are investigating it. Did you fill in the questionnaire? What did you say?
Yeah, I've said that I'll be completely, you know, open, because I'm very clear that we haven't broken any rules, you know, right from the start. I'm very confident about that, because, you know, we were very diligent at the time. I couldn't even see my granddaughter, and she's got learning difficulties, so being apart from her means that can, you know, damage the relationship, but that's what I had to do, you know. So we were very clear on following the rules, and I'm very confident about that no rules were broken, and that's why me and Keir have said also that in politics, integrity matters, and following, if you're making a law, then you can't break it, you know, you've got to follow those rules. And, you know, there was serial partying going on in number 10, cleaners having to clean up vomit off the floor and wine off the walls, and we've said quite categorically that we would resign if we were given a fixed penalty notice, and I think that's the right thing to do, because some things matter more than the individual politician, you know. It's about standards in public life, which is why I brought that motion to the House this week, because I do personally think that matters more than an individual politician. I mean, you've got to do the right thing.
Well, doing the right thing, Angela, one of the things that I've never quite understood is this whole sort of saga around you not being there and not being present at that campaign evening meeting, whatever was going on, and then you were there. Why was there a sort of complication or confusion over that?
Joe's going all Keir Starmer and lawyery.
You know,
forensic.
I did. But do you know what? I found that so frustrating because it was a member of staff that had said it once months ago, and it was dead clear I was there because I tweeted at the time. I put a picture on my profile because I was so proud to be at the Miners' Hall, because it's like the Bible. It's like a home to my spiritual home as a trade unionist of the North, to be in that place. So I never hidden the fact that I was there. I was there all along. Of course I was. I was there for work. I was in the press the next morning because me and Keir did a joint visit. So I was on a live online Zoom with Keir in the same room that was used. So there was never hiding of the fact that I was there. That's the frustration for me, to be honest, because then obviously that set hairs running that were just completely didn't really need to happen. But that was a genuine mistake that was made by a member of staff, and I'm not going to condemn them for that. Mistakes happen sometimes, but with a little bit of journalism, all they had to do is look at my tweets and they'd have found it.
Okay, straight question. So you've said you said you'll resign if you're fined, but if Keir Starmer's fined and you're not,
yes,
would you still step down because you were there?
Well, I'm confident that, obviously me and Keir were there, we were both working, so we'll either both get fined or we won't, but we're very confident that we won't get fined.
You mentioned your proud trade unionist past. Do you think the railway workers should get an inflation-linked pay rise to stop the strike going ahead that the RMT union is planning?
Well, I'm very pro, industrial relations, and as a former trade union official, I can tell you that nobody goes on strike at a whim, and I'm hopeful that they'll come to an agreement, because what we don't want to see is people losing a day's pay, having to take strike action that they can't afford to take, and we don't want to see the disruption to the public. And I know that's how trade unions feel. I know some people like to think that they just, at a drop of a hat, go out on industrial action. So-called trade union barons, we're only as good as our membership, and members don't go out unless it's an absolute necessary. So I'm hopeful that if the government stop talking the big cheese and start actually getting around the table and having those discussions, I think they can avert the strike action, because a trade unionist and the employer must know that if it ends up in strike action, that's a lose-lose for both sides.
And if it does end up in strike action, where will your sympathies be that day? The people who can't get to work, or maybe can't go and see their grandchild, for example, because there's no trains running, or the people who are on the picket line?
Well, I'm hopeful that they won't get to that point, but I'll probably be one of those commuters as well that will be in that situation. So I'm hopeful that we won't get to that point. And I know that that's not where the trade unions want to be. So, I hope that those discussions continue. We don't have to be there. They can come to an agreement, and I'm hopeful that that'll be the case.
Do you like the RMT? Because, they're not actually affiliated to the Labour Party. So,
I'm going to have to go. I'm going to lose
no!
I'm literally going to
We've got about 30
on that.
questions.
Perfect timing. But actually, you didn't answer.
I'm 5 minutes after over.
Okay. Well, Angela, thank you very much for your time.
I'm going to miss my train.
No worries. Well, there still are trains running.
I'm
Get
so
it.
Sorry.
Joe, two things jumped out at me from that Angela Rayner interview. She is so confident they did not break the rules in Durham with that beer and curry thing. But she didn't sound super confident that Keir Starmer's doing an amazing job. She was loyal, but not supremely loyal.
No, she did rather stress the contrasting styles and the fact that Keir Starmer still, to some extent, hides his real personality and charisma. And there's a bit of me that thinks she'd like him to show a little bit more of it, even if she is the sort of bolder, brash one, as she said herself. He's much more fun, she said, off camera. Perhaps not standing up in Prime Minister's questions. But yes, it's a difficult line to tread, isn't it, as Deputy Leader? And they haven't always gone on like a house on fire.
What I wanted to ask was, because I remember having a chat with her once, and she said that she was like Bridget Jones and he was like Mark Darcy. And I just wonder if you still think that comparison stands, because, of course, they end up together.
Do you think?
And I wonder, has she gone beyond that now? And maybe she would have a different fictional pairing. Now, our sister podcast, Ukrainecast, which you can get on BBC Sounds today, was talking about the fate of the two British men who were fighting on the Ukrainian side in the conflict with Russia and what's happened to them today. A story, Emma, that you've also been covering a lot. Just bring us up to date about what's actually happened.
Yeah, it's not very good news at all. It's two men, Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner, they've been fighting actually for several years with the Ukrainian military. They were fighting in Mariupol. They were under siege there, of course, for weeks. And Aidan himself was posting updates on social media right from the heart of the siege. But what happened in the end is in April, after weeks, they ran out of ammo, they ran out of food and supplies, and he had to give himself up with the rest of his unit. A few days later, he starts turning up on pro-Russian media outlets, bruised, battered, in handcuffs, being interrogated. And his colleague Sean Pinner as well was captured. And ever since then, well, they've been held in Russian-held territory in eastern Ukraine. Now, they've been in this supposed trial, which only seems to have lasted a couple of days. There hasn't been any witnesses. And today, and more footage emerges on Russian channels, and it says, well, look, they've been sentenced to the death penalty. They've been found guilty. That's now their fate. It's very frightening because we don't know what will become of them now. We know that the Foreign Office is doing what it can behind the scenes. They're supporting the families, trying to negotiate. Will there be some sort of prisoner exchange? But this is the reality now. They're being paraded on Russian media, interrogated for Russian audiences to see. And who knows what kind of duress they're under. This isn't a normal court, that we would be used to here. But cast your mind back to the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine. There were lots of people that went out from the UK, from the US, all over the world who wanted to go and help defend Ukraine. And they joined the International Legion. They joined other militia, other groups out there. But Sean and Aidan are different because they actually moved to Ukraine in 2018. Aidan passed out as a Marine a few years ago. He's engaged to a Ukrainian woman who's now come over here, actually. So his life was very much in Ukraine. He wasn't some war junkie. He wasn't some sort of thrill seeker who just jumped on the bandwagon because there was a war kicking off. He's been there for years, and he's now sat there potentially facing the firing squad, if you listen to Russian media. So it's a very frightening time for his family. And it just shows the reality of how British citizens will be treated in the middle of that conflict and the propaganda value they have, because this is a big propaganda war, aside from what's going on, of course, in the physical conflict.
I wonder what impact that will have, actually, as you say, that sort of parading, the frightening, sinister prospect of what could end up being their fate for anybody else thinking of going out to Ukraine. I understand you say it's different because they'd been there, but there'll be other British citizens who are there and have lived there for a few years.
Well, there's many that are still there who went out there a few months ago. There's probably less so who did what they did and actually joined the military a few years back. They've been there for a while. Of course it would be a deterrent. It's frightening, isn't it? I've known Aidan for a number of years because I covered his story when he actually went and fought out in Syria against ISIS. But the sight of him there, big bruise on his forehead, in handcuffs, being made to answer questions, which, again, most people believe that goes against the Geneva Conventions. You shouldn't show prisoners of war or ridicule them or show them in footage in that way. It's a very frightening picture, and they are able to be used for propaganda. Now, anybody that knows Aidan and knows what he believed in, if you watch his social media appearances since he's been in captivity, well, it seems to be a different person speaking. The views that he's coming out with now are not those of the ones of people who've known him for a long time, and you just wonder what kind of duress he and the others might be under.
How are their families doing?
Well, Aidan's family I've known for a long time as well. I mean, they're just really in bits today about it. His mum told me, she's just numb. She knew that this was probably going to happen, that he'd be put up in court and potentially face a death penalty, and her hope is that there can be some sort of prisoner exchange. But his family are just very frightened. They were very, very proud of what he was doing out there, that he became a Marine, that he wanted to fight for Ukraine. He made it his second home.
Emma, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on that and for keeping us company in the Newscast studio.
Thank you.
It's lovely to see you.
And thanks for coming in again too, Jo.
Anytime.
You can come again.
Thanks. I might.
And you can listen to Newscast every weekday as a daily podcast on BBC Sounds, whatever phone charger you use to charge up your phone. Bye.
Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.